So this is the monthly verify testing internal stakeholder call or internal customer call. And per request last month, instead of going through the whole deck at the end, what I've done in the agenda is just try to call out where there were big changes in the deck, just to make this a little more async friendly, and so we can spend more time discussing and less time presenting while we have synchronous time. So the big call out that I got was the big thing that I wanted to call out and talk about synchronously, if there were any questions, were around the epics that are in active development. I presented a canvas, opportunity canvas, around getting group code coverage data. That was based around some requests that we've received from some customers, really at the ultimate tier. And so we're targeting a feature and iterating on a feature through an epic around presenting that data across a group. So being able to get coverage data for multiple projects across the group. This builds on a feature that we are already working on to present code coverage for just a project. Now you'll be able to view code coverage for multiple projects. So that's the big thing that is a change. Really, that just helped reinforce that code testing and coverage category right now is our team's focus. And we'll be paying less attention to usability and accessibility throughout the rest of the year. So that was just the big change there. So any questions, comments, anything you want to dig on within that epic or any of the other epics that were called out there?
No, not the top. Not the top one. I don't think that the focus for the next quarter will be accessibility testing. Our group is focused on reducing the cost of CI, and the thing that I'm excited about is actually the one on point 4. Mm-hmm. And by popular request with Sid, we now have a KR to implement this in the GitLab pipelines in Q2. And we don't have a target to say this is successful because we don't have a measurable target yet because we don't know what the target will be. But the goal is to get it implemented, see where if it's improved, and then let's just focus on this as a feature to help us improve efficiency. So just to summarize, I don't know what the cost savings will be, but the success goal is to implement it and see where we're at and validate this feature even further.
Okay. And so just because it wasn't voiced over, the point 4 there is the finding failures faster. And so what we're going to be delivering right now, it's in development in 13.0, is that initial MVC. That's really just a GitLab CI config change, I believe, or GitLab CI YAML config change that will run tests for modified files first as their own stage. And if any of those fail, then the pipeline will fail a lot sooner in the process. And that was based off of some direct feedback from one of, I think, the runner developers, who said that they had to wait 45 minutes through all of the unit test suites to run before they felt confident that the one-line test that they had added passed and that they could, go to bed that night. So we found I think I voiced this over the last time we met, but we found in some initial testing that it didn't consistently show up that we would fail pipelines sooner just because there weren't any failures in the new changes. But in pipelines where there was a change, it decreased the amount of time that the pipeline ran from like 45 minutes to 20 minutes or something. So we're hopeful that for at least those breaking changes, like probably what's going to be happening is within MRs is where we're going to see the most impact. That we're going to be able to reduce the runner minutes there. But that also the developer is then going to get feedback a lot quicker so they can make their fixes a lot sooner and increase velocity from that regard as well.
That's great. We have a KPI at the top level to track. We track average merge requests duration. So we will see some data coming down there if this is reacting intendedly. Yeah. But as part of this testing and as part of this Q2, I think that we have to brainstorm on what other measurements that we can provide and say, hey, the overall duration came down, and then we can attribute like 30% of that benefits actually from this feature that we rolled out. And if it's working great, we'll just put it as a permanent thing in our pipelines in Q2.
Awesome. Any other questions as people are able to thumb through the deck? Anything you want to call out or surface that we should discuss? All right. We'll revisit that before we finish up the call, but I'm going to keep moving through the agenda. Follow-ups from the last call. The test case reporting, Alex, who wasn't able to make it today, and Mech both brought up what is different from the last time. So in talking about test case history, just thinking about what ran last time versus didn't, we think that we cover that at least within the merge request context on that test summary widget today, but it doesn't work well in that pipeline run view, or if you're just running through pipelines and not using merge requests. So we have an epic open for historic test insights. The team has started discussing some ways to store that makes sense. So we're not just storing full JUnit reports for everything forever, because that gets expensive really quickly, and it's not performant to try to parse those things to build out a report. So we're doing some initial investigation there, trying to figure out what is the right level of data, right level of detail that we need to provide. So there's some interesting discussion already happening in that epic. That'll probably be something that we pick up in the latter half of the year, though. It makes a lot of sense for us to try to address that gap that we have in the product of just not being able to see for your tests, how were the last 10 runs of it within that pipeline or for that branch. So we see that as being something we pick up yet this year. And otherwise, we didn't really have anything else to follow up on that I got out of the notes from the last time. And Mech, anything else you want to talk about in that Q2 key result around the dog fooding, the selectively running tests, or do you feel like we got it covered already?
We got it covered already. Just gonna, for the context of the call, I'll just share screen for transparency as well, where we're at in terms of OKRs. So I wanted to focus on this KR specifically. So dog food features to successfully run tests in GitLab Machine workflow. And if you click on that, it shows the overall plan. And this is the end goal where I think success is we reach a decision whether to make it a permanent addition to our CI configuration. And we'll start with a unit test first. I was talking to Joanna last week where we were thinking of iterating and putting in all the test levels, but maybe groups. But I think that pattern is actually less productive. I think the iteration is look at the lowest level of the test first, and this is a unit test, and just implement it broadly. And it's better to measure that way than coming in and say, I'm gonna add this for the end-to-end tests and also the integration test only for like, say, the group source code. That's a lot harder to implement. I think the iteration here is just do all the tests, but the lowest level, which is unit tests, and that will give us like an easier measurement.
Yeah, sounds like a good way to baseline.
Cool.
Excellent.
Any questions from the group?
I don't have any questions today. We'd love to get your input as the director of quality, Mech, on that epic around the group code coverage, if it's an interesting thing for your group. I'll be reaching out to the directors and folks on the rest of the engineering team as well, just to get some input there. We'd love to be able to meet a need for our internal customers as well as our other customers in developing that epic. But otherwise, I don't think I have anything today.
I have one question. Just as a new GitLab team member, I've only been here for a couple months. I was curious about the way that we organize our end-to-end tests right now from like the quality perspective. You talked about selectively running tests, and I was wondering what you specifically meant by that. Is it the stuff that we were talking about in terms of the running tests for modified files first, or is there additional strategies like, okay, these are the key tests and we run those in a block before we continue on kind of thing? I know I've done things like that in the past. So you'd have smoke tests and then you'd have end-to-end tests. And if the smoke test failed, you wouldn't bother running the rest of them.
Yes, exactly. We have that right now in our pipelines on staging. So we actually have two different buckets now. There's the smoke tests and there's also the reliable tests, which is new. And that's like the test that we run first, and it's proven to be stable for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then the rest of the population where it might be demoted to quarantine because it's flaky. So we have that in place. That's hand rolled. It's engineers triaging and then changing tags and all that. We could work on it together and make it a feature. But for this specific iteration in this quarter, it's dog fooding run newly modified first. And I can update the wording in our OKR.
I'm new, so I lack quite a bit of context.
No, I'm happy to explain. And there's no weird questions at all. You can always ask us any questions you like. When I say end-to-end test, it's kind of gnarly. We don't really run it in the main GitLab pipeline. We use like a different project, and it runs another pipeline in a different project. So it won't be easy to run, like it's hard to determine if the end-to-end tests were updated. One, because it's complexity in configuration. Mm-hmm. The second one is developers don't really update the end-to-end tests right now. Some do, but it's not broadly. So you wouldn't get that signal that, hey, an end-to-end test was updated, and it wouldn't yield to results. However, the unit tests and the integration tests are updated very frequently as part of the MRs, and it's a better suitable population of tests, level of tests for what we're doing here.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, more than happy to talk about it anytime.
Mick, you mentioned that developers aren't updating the end-to-end tests. I guess what would be the signal to somebody to update an end-to-end test?
Right now we have that quad planning, which is like a human process. Yeah. It's a 3 amigo evolution of GitLab, and that's where we can do a bit better there. We wanted to essentially have like proactive test planning and then call out, hey, you need to add something new here or update the test. It's not where we want it to be yet. I'll leave it at that. And so the other thing is that locators sometimes change, and that's the easy way for them to update. We've seen cases where tests break because the front-end locators are changing, and that's an easier signal. So go ahead. I think I cut you off.
Oh, no problem. So it sounds like the workflow then is, in that quad planning today, somebody has the context of there's an end-to-end test that covers this scenario already, or is adjacent to this feature that we could, if we update an existing test, we covered this this user path as well. But when they have to have that context in their head and then create a subsequent issue to do the update for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Or it could be a discussion where I've heard that in the dev product area, like source code, it's working really well, but it's just these aha moments in the planning issue, like, oh yes, we forgot that, and like the SCT saved the day, but it doesn't really get like accounted somewhere. Yeah. We're trying to measure that in a better way. I love to brainstorm ideas here because this is a problem that is everywhere. Like mapping the end-to-end test to the code changes, not easy. And the way the teams get by is actually using tags, like test tags. Like this test has a tag on this feature, and then you just run the whole suite.
Yeah. I wonder if, just thinking about like as part of planning, and that workflow is not specific just to GitLab, of team gets together talking about what needs to be tested, what tests need to be updated. As the test planning feature starts to really get built out, if there'd be a way to add to an issue a test plan of here are the tests that we need to call out and run first. And it could do a similar type of thing where you build a dynamic stage of these source files and test files changed. Here's test files potentially that didn't change, but we know we want to run early on. So you could do a kind of fuller smoke test, but one that is more specific to the path of that issue or that merge request.
Great call out. We actually try that too. We have an issue template for test plans, nice. But with the spirit of us moving so fast, we just make it really lightweight. So now it's in the feature planning issue where I just have like 5 bullet lists. However, I do think that this pattern is there for all our customers, like other aviation or agriculture or financial. I'm pretty sure they need to create a test plan. With us we're moving so fast that the paperwork is not needed.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Cool.
My bad question, and this is from my previous experience. One thing that I used to do, and I don't know what the process is here, is just kind of enforce through process developers running the tests locally a lot more often, including the end-to-end test. So in previous teams, like developers would be required to run the end-to-end test locally before they put their merge request up, just to make sure they weren't breaking them. And the maintenance and ownership over the end-to-end tests belonged at least partially to the developers and partially to the quality specialists. I'm wondering if that isn't the case at GitLab, or like what kind of onus is on the developers to be running a test locally before they use cloud compute resources effectively in order to do it for them?
That's a great question. I think we iterated the other way, meaning we are very focused on developer engineering productivity, that we want to free up the resources on the local computer and just have it be there. It just works in CI with review apps and things. But I think there's a good balance to be made here. Like static analysis, all that stuff, the quick tests to be able to run. I think it's being run right now, but like the longer poll tests, like tests that takes 30 minutes and things like that, we don't run it locally because it's better to have it just parked in the cloud and then you go check on it later.
Right. I guess it would be then up to the developer to recognize that this specific test is the one that I care about right now, and I'm going to run this one test. So it doesn't take 30 minutes; it would just take 5. But
right, that's a great call out. Yeah, I think we have uncovered an idea here, and something to run by my team is to. So instead of you checking the feature manually, you should be running the end-to-end automated test on your local machine.
I think it's a combination of doing both. That's what I've done in the past. You probably should run the code yourself and see it and play with it before you check it in. But also you should make sure that all of our testing suite is still functional with your change is what I've done. And I'm not saying that that's bad or good. I'm just saying that is something that I've done. Yeah. My counter argument to your point about freeing up resources on the developer machine would be, I think it's even more expensive to developer productivity when they have to go back to something that they've previously like taken out of their head. It's like, okay, the merge request is in, this is now left my brain. And then they come back an hour, 2 hours later, a day later with the failure in the intent job. And they're like, oh, what was I doing again? Okay. Then that context switch is really expensive for engineers.
That context switch, unfortunately, is natural here because we work async, and it's. I think we can strive to improve those buckets of async work and ensure the context gets carried over so they can pick it up really fast. But I think we can iterate around here more. I was gonna kindly ask Joanna to create an issue for our team to investigate if we could. Come up with a guideline to run just 1 or 2 end-to-end tests if you're developing in your area, like the smoke test, for example, in your product group would be beneficial. Joanna, what are your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and maybe it's something like just having a command or something that that folks can run, like that will just run the tests for their specific stage or something like that. Because like the way that our tests are organized right now, they're kind of organized by stage already. So maybe we can just make that a little bit easier for folks. And I can create that issue too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting dogfooding and potentially building a GitLab of from your suite of tests, here are the ones that are applicable to a feature. And then we could, like I said, make that kind of fuller smoke test that can run locally, at least in some cases, if you're not having to spin up dozens and dozens of services potentially. But for our case, or for our purposes, it might be really interesting to run not just your unit tests or your integration tests, but also those end-to-end tests as part of your pipeline early on. Find those breaking changes sooner.
Yeah, what I'm thinking from a user standpoint, because what'll be really nice for me when we're developing is I don't want to know what tests I need to run, but if you give me really clear instructions, like in the MR, for example, hey, this is like a snippet you can copy over in your command line, just like paste it and run. That helps me a lot. I'm more willing to like do it. Like, okay, GitLab's telling me I need to run this, and then I'll go ahead and run it.
Yeah.
And the knowledge, like if we can figure out which test to run in from GitLab itself, that'll be cool as well. And just I'm sure the dog fooding will come up, and if we build something outside GitLab, it's gonna trigger a dog fooding triage again. And before it's great to have an issue, but before we move any further, let's try to see if we can just put in the product directly.
For sure. Awesome. Well, I'm excited that we got to have a kind of mini Think Big session in our internal call this week, or this month rather.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
No, we were at the end of the agenda and the questions, so that's perfect.
Great collaboration. I think this setting is really been productive.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Hopefully folks have, if they weren't actively engaged in discussion, took a minute to thumb through the roadmap. Any other questions from the deck? All right. If you have questions, async, by all means, ping me in the document itself or here or in the G testing channel. I'd be happy to answer those there. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Have a great long weekend.
Cheers.
Yeah. Take care.